Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Soccer Queens podcast, where we talk about everything female athlete performance. It's been a while since we've had a nutrition expert and registered dietitian on, but today I'm joined with my friend and amazing colleague, Lindsey Cortes. She works with youth athletes, college and pro, and she's had a wealth of experience working with athletes on their nutritional needs and goals. So, Lindsey, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Erica. It's always fun to do podcast swaps. So I was thrilled to have you as a guest on mine, and I'm super excited to be on yours because I love your podcast. I love tuning in.
I appreciate that. Yeah, it's just amazing because we have a similar audience, and
We
it's
do.
just so nice to dive into that blend of training and nutrition, and we cannot work on them alone. So I'm really glad that we're going to dive in and shed light on the needs of the youth female athlete today. But before we get started, why don't you give the audience a background on how you got into being a registered dietitian and your experience in sports?
Sure. So I, still consider myself an athlete now. I've been an athlete from a young age, and I was really big into gymnastics. Actually, that was my main sport growing up. And then that transferred into track and field in college. I had sort of a gymnastics wise sort of a career ending surgery, but I was able to use my skills in sprints and also inversion to do sprints and hurdles and pole vault in college at a Division I university. So I was doing that. And I think my interest in nutrition always related to being an athlete. That was who I was, and what I loved to do was sport. And I was interested in how nutrition played a role. It's funny always in hindsight though, because I think back at a young age already, I had my superstitions, as a lot of gymnasts do. I had my superstitions with food. On meat day, I would eat the same exact thing, because I was, very, I think, particular and nervous about performance. So I had it down. I still remember what I got with this Subway tuna fish sandwich with pickles on the specific bread that they had every day before a gymnastics meet. So I was interested in it, and I'm sure we can talk about this, but some things in hindsight I'm like, oh, that wasn't good. For example, I'll just share with you, I was calorie counting by age 15, which I did not need to be doing, but it's because of that interest, which again in hindsight I can say was not such good things, that when I was trying to figure out what do I want to study in college, even my own mother pointed out, like, well, you're really it's funny how I say this, but my mom was like, you're really good at like your diet and dieting and being regimented with that. Like maybe you can teach other people how to do that too. And so I got into the field of nutrition. Now I learned on my journey and in studying it that being super regimented with my nutrition and calorie counting, not only was that not good for me, but that actually isn't good for other people either. My mom didn't know that at the time. She now does. So I got into it, and I started changing. I started learning how to truly fuel my body for performance, for sport. And again, it doesn't involve calorie counting, but that sort of was my entryway into it. I think as a college athlete, as many athletes do struggle, I struggled with the dining halls, struggled with low iron, struggled with just, I had morning practice, 6 a.m. and afternoon practice. And it was a lot from the fueling to keep up with. And I was studying it at the same time. And so for me, it was nutrition is great for health, but I also was, how do I apply this to me as an athlete and my unique needs? So that's kind of how I got into it. It was always, nutrition was always tied to sport.
I absolutely love your story and also the message that you're putting out there for female athletes and to really focus on that performance side. So
Mhm.
what are some things that female athletes can be paying attention to understand if they're fueling enough?
Yeah, so to fueling enough is interesting, because I think first and foremost, uh, one of the things is just you're not going to be feeling terrible, which I know is hard to explain. But if you're not fueling enough, you're going to be struggling with fatigue, extreme fatigue, not performing well. So if everybody else on your team is, getting faster, stronger, performing well, and you're stagnant or worsening in your performance, that would be, a sign that maybe your nutrition is not supporting your training goals. Every athlete's going to be tired on some level because you're pushing your body, but after a meal and a good night of sleep, you should be re-energized. And so if you're not, if your tiredness and fatigue and lethargy is just continuing to like stack up and build up, then you could be under fueling, because you're not properly recovering and setting yourself up for success. So I know like that whole concept of like feeling tired or not feeling good, it's hard to truly measure that. But again, it's something, if it just keeps building and it's not improving, or keeps worsening. Another sign of underfueling would be if we do have biomarkers or lab values that are out of whack. So if you are showing anemia or low iron or low vitamin D, is this stemming from improper nutrition and underfueling? Because of course, if you're underfueling, then you're not eating enough iron either. Um, Other signs of underfueling, injuries, which I know is a big thing, especially in the clients you work with too, and trying to prevent that. We all roll our ankle and get injured. That's one thing. But if you feel like you're never healing from your injury, um, or specific injuries, I always like to highlight our bone injuries. That plays a big role in our nutrition as well. So those are some other signs that underfueling might be at play.
Those are really great to have insight on. And this is why I had you on the podcast, because no amount of strength training is going to fully prevent these injuries if the nutrition is not on point, especially for that growing youth female athlete. There's so many needs, especially the iron, the vitamin D. Are there any other female athlete specific nutrient needs that we need to pay attention to?
Well, calcium would be another huge one, especially for our younger athletes that are growing and developing. Calcium is a huge one because 90% of our bone mineral content is should be in place before around age 18. So that calcium and its role in our bone health is just huge in our youth and adolescent years. So calcium's playing a huge role. And also, as you know, Erica, calcium plays a role in muscle contraction as well. But I just think as far as like a really important nutrient, iron's up there, vitamin D and calcium is a huge one. Those are our three probably biggest ones, but every single nutrient is important. We've got things like selenium that are great for your immune system. And I mean, what are kids doing, and college athletes and high school athletes? We are breathing and spitting on each other and sharing water bottles. So we need things like selenium and zinc for our building up our immune system. Every single vitamin and mineral is important, but I would say that iron, calcium, vitamin D are kind of ones that we need a lot of, and we might need to focus on extra because it's kind of hard to get enough calcium unless you're drinking milk 3-4 times a day, which I think is a great habit for teen athletes to do. But, here we are in 2022 where there's a lot of plant-based milk options and people who might want to be vegan or vegetarian, and our calcium intake is kind of challenging to get. So yeah, I think those are the three that I would really highlight. This is not a vitamin or mineral, but just a nutrient, is our omega-3 fatty acids that help reduce inflammation. That's another important one for all athletes, not just female athletes, but that's another one to focus on and bring some attention to.
Awesome. I hope you guys are taking notes on this, because this is just such powerful information, and it's really going to be the game changer in terms of female athlete performance. Let's come back to the underfueling. So I've heard that if a female athlete is underfueling, it could have some negative effects on the menstrual cycle. Can you dive into that?
Yeah. So ultimately, when you think about why we have a menstrual cycle, and this might not resonate with your female athlete listeners, but I think it's important to explain. The reason as women that we have a menstrual cycle is because at some point in time, if we choose to have children, our amazing bodies can do that. And I had to put myself on mute because maybe you heard my crying baby in the background for a little bit there. I don't know if that'll come through on the recording, but it is absolutely amazing that the female body is capable of doing this. And that's what a menstrual cycle is it's your body preparing for having a baby. And now if you are 12, 13, 14, 16, 18, 22 years old, this might be the last thing on your mind. You're like, no, I care about my sport in school right now. But it's something that you need to have it. If your period comes when you're 12 years old, you don't ever want to lose that, because even if you're not caring about, having kids right now, which you shouldn't at 12 years old, if you do lose that ability, that could cause lifelong damage and affect you when you are 32 years old. And that is important to you. So that is why we have a menstrual cycle, the main reason. However, as female bodies, there's more benefits to having a menstrual cycle than just having kids. In fact, the ways that our hormones fluctuate, I always say that your period is like your superpower, because your hormones, estrogen, testosterone, insulin like growth factor, luteinizing hormone, follicle stimulating hormone, even our hunger and fullness hormones that are called leptin and ghrelin, they all work together. So the hormones that we have for reproduction are the same hormones that we use to help us build muscle, to help us recover, to give us good hunger and fullness signals. So your hormones are all working together at the same time. Another huge one, estrogen, like I just mentioned, this is actually your most powerful hormone in building bone. And this is why girls and women who lose estrogen, whether at a young age or an older age, are at a really high risk for bone fractures and things like osteoporosis and osteopenia. So as an athlete who's not thinking about having children, you still need to make sure that you get your menstrual cycle, because you need to make sure that you have your estrogen and your testosterone to build your bone and build muscle and recover. Okay, so I might be going on a little bit of a tangent here, but your question was, how does underfueling play a role in your menstrual cycle? Well, if you're underfueling, you're sending a sign to your body that says, I don't have enough nutrition to support myself. Then, of course, I don't have enough nutrition to support a baby. And so it shuts down that process. It shuts down that process of making hormones. And again, although as an athlete, you might be thinking, well, good, I don't want to have a baby. It's not good, because it shuts down everything that all those hormones do. It shuts down your ability to get stronger, get faster, build muscle, recover, build bone, send hunger, fullness signals. But that's when you're underfueling, that's the signal that you're giving your body is, I don't even have enough energy to support myself. So I'm going to shut down this entire process. And that's what happens in so many, when this happens to girls and women that are underfueling, they lose their period. And I get it. The first time you skip a period, you're kind of like, good, because that thing's annoying, like I get it. I understand. It's kind of nice to not have a period for a little bit, but the longer this goes on, everything gets worse and worse and worse. So I always tell listeners, if you skip a period once, no need to freak out. Just take note of it. If you skip a period twice, like 2 periods in a row, okay, like your red flag should be waving. Think about what's going on in my life with my nutrition, my training. Do I need to see someone? If you've missed your period 3 months in a row, that is definitely a problem. Seek help, whether it be from a dietitian, a doctor, just inquire more. This is time that, okay, we can't let this continue. So if you miss one period, I don't want anybody to freak out. But it's as this goes on longer and those hormones are all shut down, we will run into problems. Again, that long term with that reproduction, but as athletes, you run into problems of injury, of hunger, fullness hormones being shut off, of not recovering well. So there are definitely immediate consequences for the female athlete.
I'm glad you went on that tangent because that really puts it all together on why we need to have this cycle to really take advantage of our training and our
Mhm.
recovery. And there's a lot of research coming out now. It's still really conflicted on the menstrual cycle impact on ACL injury.
Mm.
And you might get frustrated at this or laugh at this, but I was in a soccer group yesterday and there were some parents chiming into this discussion and they were like, "Oh, yeah, the menstrual cycle leaves female athletes at a greater risk for ACL and
Hmm.
apparently birth control is the solution." And
Ooh.
I just shook my head and was like, "Oh gosh, like why aren't female athletes being informed about nutrition and lifestyle changes so they can reduce the chance of ACL during the menstrual cycle?" So, what are some
Right.
nutritional considerations during certain phases of the cycle, usually the luteal phase when they're experiencing these PMS symptoms like
Mhm.
irritability or disrupted sleep? What are some specific nutritional considerations we can pay attention to?
Sure. Yeah, I would agree with you. Our faces, or when that recommendation for the birth control, that's not the answer. And to say that our menstrual cycle is causing more ACL injuries is certainly not the case. But it is to educate yourself on what is your body going through throughout the menstrual cycle, so that you can be empowered with what to do. So ultimately, you can break down your menstrual cycle into either two phases: the follicular, which is the first half, or the luteal, the second half. You can go a little further and break those down into further phases to make a total of four. But that luteal phase is where we do see the most fluctuations. The second half of your cycle is where you see the most fluctuations in hormones, notably estrogen and progesterone. Now, progesterone specifically is what we call a little bit more of a catabolic hormone, one that causes some breakdown. And because of that, our body doesn't recover as well. And as you know this information and as you start to track your cycle, you may start to notice this, that, oh, yeah, that second half of my phase, or the 1 or 2 weeks before my period comes, is when I do feel more sore. I do feel more tired. I do feel like I need to sleep in more. I do feel like when I hit the gym, like I'm just not hitting my PRs. I'm not lifting the heaviest. I'm not running the fastest. And a lot of that has to do with our higher progesterone. Now, I don't want to paint progesterone to be the bad one, because it's also super important, and it works in conjunction with estrogen, which is an anabolic hormone that helps you build things. So you need both, and you need a balance of both. But with that being said, if you have a little more breakdown happening because of high progesterone in your luteal phase, this is why maybe we're at a slightly higher risk of injury during that phase, because our body's a little more broken down. Well, what do we do about that? You give yourself the proper recovery tools to build yourself back up. So that's proper sleep, first and foremost. That's also focusing on hydration to make sure that you are delivering nutrients to your body, that your joints and tendons and ligaments are well lubricated. And then it's focusing massively on protein during your luteal phase, not just protein throughout your entire day, that's important, but protein specifically post workout to really help with that recovery. Um, I think another nutrient I mentioned earlier is like omega 3s for reducing inflammation. So I think a little extra focus on anti inflammatories and antioxidants that help your body repair and recover during this luteal phase would be really important too. So I think that's kind of like the overarching. And then to be a little more specific for your listeners, when I hit on that protein piece, I think there's a lot of stuff on the internet to just say, yeah, like protein post workout, or we have that 20 grams of protein is like this gold standard. Well, definitely hit your 20 grams post workout. You might even need a little bit more, during this phase. Why not go for 25? Why not go for 30 grams of protein? Just really optimize your post workout fueling and protein recovery. And same thing with that antioxidants and anti-inflammatories is, this is something that's healthy all the time to do. So I wouldn't stop you from eating blueberries, when during your follicular phase either, but it's just something of like, what can I look up some recipes that are antioxidant or anti-inflammatory boosting? Or can I make sure, like, if you like fish, great, have all the fish, but maybe during your luteal phase, eat salmon specifically for those omega-3s. Buy some canned salmon packets instead of just canned tuna. Little things like that to just bring a little more focus or emphasis on.
What about carbohydrate needs during the luteal phase? Should they be doubling them or upping them a little bit to kind of combat that fatigue?
Yes, this carbohydrates in the luteal phase get a little bit confusing. Okay. First and foremost, to combat that fatigue, I'll say yes. And this is why a lot of people, even women, have said for years, like, "Oh, I'm craving sugar when you PMS. We're craving sugar and sweets." And a lot of that is actually because um, we during our luteal phase, we're actually struggling to tap into our stored carbohydrates. So we all have stored energy on our body, and carbohydrates are in the form of stored glycogen in our muscles and in our liver. And during that luteal phase, it's a little harder for us to tap into our stored energy, which means we need more readily available energy. So it is okay and probably a good thing for you to have a few more frequent snacks when you're PMSing. That might help keep your blood sugar up and your energy levels up. And it is good and okay to have those snacks be carbohydrate snacks. And if anything, too, that whole kind of craving concept that I have air quotes around, it might even be a good thing to know to bring that focus on. I want to intentionally have carbohydrates at breakfast, at snack, at lunch, so that I don't have super intense cravings because my body's struggling to tap into the stored carbs. Did that make sense, Erica?
Yeah, I learned something new. That's super helpful. So I'm sure everyone gained something from that. And I'm really glad we're talking about this because when I saw that comment in the group, it was just frustrating because there's just not enough education or even other solutions being provided. And I'm just glad you gave solutions. And the whole, oh, well, menstrual cycle might leave them at a greater ACL risk, that's really defeating. And a female athlete can't control that. She's going to get her menstrual cycle. So what can we do about it? How can we tweak nutrition? So thank you so much for sharing that. And we're not saying oral contraceptives aren't an option. I'm not going to speak on that, but there needs to also be other options given.
Well, and what I always say about oral contraceptives is birth control is for birth control purposes. And so if that's a choice that you make, and I've made that in my life as well, like, that's perfectly fine. We have to make health choices individually, but birth control is for birth control. Birth control is not for preventing ACL injury.
Mhm. Exactly. And it's almost like covering up a gushing wound with a Band-Aid. So if you take oral contraceptives, but your diet's still bad, that doesn't mean you're going to fully prevent ACL. So it's just kind of treating those symptoms and not getting to the root cause of things, which is very common nowadays. But
Absolutely.
let's go into injuries a little bit further. So how does nutrition play a role in the injury reduction side of things?
Yeah, I mean, I think nutrition plays a role both in preventing injury as well as recovering from injury. Like I said earlier, if we're going to roll our ankle, the best diet in the world isn't going to, stop that from happening. If we, step off the stairs wrong, or we have a collision with somebody on the field, like, injuries, of course, there's a certain extent that injuries are going to happen. But there are some injuries that I think are a little more preventable from the nutrition side. So I've mentioned bone a couple times, and,
Mhm.
like, stress fractures. And now stress fractures can absolutely happen having nothing to do with nutrition, just from repeated pounding or biomechanics. But we do see a lot of stress fractures happening because of low bone mineral density, which is often stemming from improper nutrition and underfueling in the first place. So if you have years built up of improper nutrition, underfueling, then over years you're not building proper bone, and then we have a huge increased risk of stress fracture and bone injury. So that's one way that nutrition is preventative to prevent injuries with those bone injuries. We can also talk about preventative, even with our, tendon, ligament, muscular strains. It's a little harder to find in like the research, but I'll just say more anecdotally with clients that I've worked with, that like when they come to me having years of underfueling and just chronic, shoulder injuries or chronic hamstring pain, and then after working together, they're like, and this is something that takes time. They might be feeling in 3 months like, oh, I feel better, but it's something more like, 2 years later, they're like, oh, I haven't had an injury. I haven't had a muscle injury in 2 years. And yet I used to always get muscle injuries. So it's harder to find in the research just because those injuries, there's more than one reason for it happening, typically. But I do think that nutrition plays a huge role in the prevention of it. And then we also have, the recovery from your injuries. So again, it's, if we do get injured, how quickly are we recovering, or how well are we recovering? And this is another thing where I think the underfueling is like, if we do have an injury and then we just don't properly recover, that's where that one injury turns into this like 4-year long nagging injury, because it's never fully recovering. And so you want to make sure that your nutrition is helping you fully and properly recover. And this is, it's everything. It's your day-to-day nutrition. And are we getting enough energy? Are we getting enough protein? And then all our little stuff. Are we getting enough vitamin C, which is a natural antioxidant? And are we getting that every single day? So those, it adds up over time.
Yes, you can't fix it with just eating healthy one day a week and getting those nutrients.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
as far as the day-to-day and the long term, anyone who's just starting out on getting their nutrition dialed in, what are like some of your first suggestions on where to start to get on track?
Sure. Well, I would say that as an athlete, do not neglect your pre and post workout fueling. I think that's a habit that every athlete should be in, that you're always fueling up before any workout and you're always recovering with fuel after your workout. And it's interesting because a lot of people and a lot of athletes, because we're so used to like pushing ourselves or doing a lot, then when it is an easy day or it is the off season, we think, well, I don't need that. And that's when we get in trouble and when underfueling starts happening. So, you know what? I don't have many food rules, Erica. I'm a very much like there. I have no rules around food. Any food can fit. You can fuel with anything at any time. But one of my rules is, as an athlete, you always eat before and after your workout. So that is somewhere that I would really encourage people, even if it's an easy day, even if it's off season, get into the habit of always having something pre and post workout. Maybe when you're in season, it's really hard training, maybe you have more. And when it's off season, it's light training, you have less, but you still always do it. So that's one place to start. And then the next place to start would be looking at your actual meals, your breakfast, lunch, dinner, or for athletes, it might be breakfast number 2, lunch and lunch number 2. But we want to look at our main meals, which might be different as an athlete. We might have 4 meals a day or different names for them because we're practice times eating at different times. But you want to look at those main meals and see if you've got a good balance of your food groups. And I like to oversimplify and just focus on our carbohydrates, meaning your starchy carbohydrates, whether that be bread, rice, pasta, or sweet potato, looking at your carbohydrates, and then your protein, and then your color, which could be fruit or vegetables. And I always like to have people start with just getting an equal balance of all 3 of those food groups on your plate to begin with. So, working with a client one-on-one, we might need to dial in portions a bit more, but let's just for reference say that you have, a baseball sized portion of carbohydrate, have a baseball sized portion of protein, a baseball sized portion of fruit or vegetable, and you're kind of within balance. And somewhere on that plate, you want to make sure that you have some fats as well. It would just be a little crazy to have a baseball sized portion of olive oil on your plate. So you don't need quite as much, but make sure that there's some fats there too. So just kind of looking at your meals, are we having dinner that's just a plate full of pasta? Look, as athletes, we need carbs and we need pasta, and that's wonderful. But it's like, okay, well, how can I change that plate full of pasta to sneak in some meatballs or chicken and incorporate the broccoli in there as well, so that I am getting carbohydrate, protein, and color. And if we're used to our breakfast, we just, cook up eggs and avocado. It's like, well, that's protein and fat. So how can I add in a piece of toast for my carbs and some strawberries for my color, and just start making those balanced meals at the main meals?
I really like those, and those are going to be really helpful for everyone listening, especially the female athletes who are playing year round and just jumping from school to practice to maybe something else, and then parents commuting. And you're a parent, so you know how busy it can get. Is there any other advice you'd give for parents or female athletes who have that jam-packed schedule and just ensuring they get the proper meals in?
Yeah, this might not be what people expect to hear, but take advantage of convenience foods and packaged foods. And I just said it's not what people expect to hear. They probably expected me to, focus on whole foods and natural things and cooking from home, and that's great. But if you are so busy as most student athletes are, if you're not taking advantage of those foods, then you're just going to wind up underfueling. And I think that's the worst case. That's worse, right? What's the worst scenario out of the two? Underfueling, and then that affecting things like your injuries or menstrual cycle is the worst situation than having something from a package. So if you can make everything from home and you can meal prep, wonderful. But if you can't, buy the Uncrustables if that's helpful. Buy the pre-made smoothie drinks. Buy the ready-to-drink chocolate milks that are shelf stable that you can throw in your bag. Buy the trail mix packages that, again, you can throw in your bag, take with you. So take advantage of some of these food options that are packaged or just more convenient for you. And I think my second tip would be to find foods that are really nutrient dense. So I have a blog on my website actually about, I think it's the 6 best foods for athletes. And it's, avocado and trail mix and dried fruit, because you're getting a lot of nutrients in even just a few bites.
So, guys, just make sure you get something in. And like you said, Lindsey, getting those macros, making sure they're not underfueling is key. And I think it might have been you who posted this, and I loved it. It was what to buy at convenience stores. So maybe there's like a Starbucks there or a Dunkin' Donuts and you're at a tournament, like get the egg bites, or which I love. I love Starbucks egg bites, or
I
get
know
like a
they're oddly really
bagel.
good.
They're really good, and they're packed with protein. So I
Mhm.
really love that because, yeah, realistically, we can't always do the Tupperware Whole Foods life, or, we can't always buy our pasture raised eggs, So that's super,
Right.
super helpful.
And I think when you're in high school, you have the help of your parents that might be able to, bring you food when you're stepping off the soccer field or something. But um, and that not everybody, by the way, not everybody has that parental support. Parents are busy too, and but some of us do. But then in college, you're on your own, and when you're traveling with a college team, you're gonna be stopping at restaurants with the entire team or just at a gas station. And it's like, this is your chance to eat. And so eating is always going, as an athlete, eating is going to be better than not eating and skipping that meal. So being comfortable with stopping at the Starbucks or stopping at the gas station and figuring out, like, you know what? Like, this beef jerky is going to be my protein. And then this package of dried fruit is going to be my color. It's not the best thing, but it's better than not getting any fruit in for the day.
Mhm. So you asked me this on your podcast and some of your favorite like pregame meals. I know you mentioned your Subway sandwich earlier. Was there
Yeah.
anything else, or even like post competition, that you love to fuel with?
Yeah. So my Subway sandwich was in my gymnastics days, which are long gone now. Um, right now, my sport of choice is running, and I do road races and some trail races of varying distances. But my favorite like pre-race for me is um, and I don't know, it could be toast or it could be a bagel, but for some reason it's the frozen waffles. I think because I always have them, right? Like sometimes I do run out of the fresh bread or whatever, but the frozen waffles, and you can get, the blueberry or the cinnamon, but I do frozen waffles with some peanut butter, drizzle, honey, and whatever fruit I have, some berries. And that's always like my pre-race. I might add something extra to it, some if depending the timeline, like maybe I'll add a yogurt or add a sports nutrition bar of some sort. But the two frozen waffles with some nut butter, honey, and some berries is my go-to before a race. Um, and then afterwards, oh man, I just love chocolate milk.
Yes. I know we discussed that last time.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
and I do need more than just chocolate milk. Again, it's like a timeline thing, right? So, do I just have chocolate milk and then 30 minutes later after I shower, whatever, like then I have a full recovery meal? Or sometimes I might use my chocolate milk and blend it with frozen fruit and yogurt and make a full recovery smoothie. But I go for the chocolate milk. It's so cliche. I feel like it's such a sports dietitian thing, but it's like honestly, it's delicious and it really does recover the carbohydrates, the protein, the rehydration, and you'd be shocked to hear this, Erica. There are electrolytes in milk, sodium, potassium. It's a great electrolyte beverage too.
Yeah, I was looking at some of the chocolate milks that are you don't have to refrigerate them, they're just on the shelf, they last a long time, and I
Mhm.
saw the potassium and I was like, "Wow, this is, amazing. This is such a good bang for buck."
It is.
So yeah, chocolate milk, you guys, and also the frozen waffles with the nut butter sounds amazing. So I'm definitely gonna steal that from you.
Yeah.
It's super yummy, but just really great for that energy before competition. So I love that suggestion. Now,
Mhm.
as we wrap up, I know you have a course and some one-on-one coaching. Is there anything else that you're offering for female athletes?
Yeah, so right now I have two coaching programs where myself and the other dietitian on my team, Jenna, work closely one on one with our clients. The two programs, the main difference is just a little bit of how they're set up and kind of age. So I have a program for our younger athletes and a program for our air quote older athletes. I say older because it's like people like my age. So we have two programs where we're one on one working individually with our clients and meeting their unique individual fueling needs. And then I have an online course. It's a 70-minute instructional video training with some corresponding handouts. And this is great for just if you just want to learn more, or whether it's I want to start here to know if I want to do the one on one coaching, or if we don't need that one on one support, but we just want to learn a little bit more specifically about female athletes and fueling to your menstrual cycle and preventing underfueling. Those are the main topics of that online course.
Awesome. So, guys, be sure to check those out in the caption below. Everything is linked. And Lindsey, what's your Instagram handle again?
At female.athlete.nutrition.
Perfect. So, very straightforward. We know what
Mhm.
Lindsey's about, what her expertise is. Check that out in the caption below as well. Lindsey, this has been fantastic. I love your knowledge and I love all the work that you're doing. And I'm sure my audience will definitely follow up with you. So, thank you.
Thank you so much, Erica. And I love what you're doing. So keep doing it. I feel like when we first connected, it was like, oh, we're like mirror images, but you focusing on the training and me focusing on the nutrition. So thankful to be on your podcast today.
Thank you so much.